The wind is in the northwest, so it's pretty cold. It's quite a good bit of it though. The BBC says 10 miles an hour. Wind Guru says gusts of 23. 23 is a bit much for me, but it's sheltered here, so I think I'll be alright. I'm going to go upriver against the tide.
I had planned to take Katie as far up the Firth of Forth as I could get her, so early one morning, when few people were around to censure me for sailing in the harbour, I left Anstruther and turned her bow towards the west.
Absolutely splendid morning for sail. A few bits of nasty around.
I sailed on past St Monans with its magnificent church, without going into harbour because St Monans is still a proper fishing port and doesn't welcome us sailors with our hoity-toity ways and fancy vessels, and who can blame them for that?
Well, I'd say we're getting to 20 miles an hour now. This is called the Lady's Folly, and it's just before Elie. I don't know how they pronounce it. Everybody says it's the prettiest of the villages along here, but I think that's just because it's got sand. It doesn't have a proper harbour, it just has a kind of curvy wall and some rocks. So I might just nip in and have a look, I don't know. Wind has kind of come round a bit on the nose.
So it was down with the sails, followed by a suitably cautious low revs tick-over creep around the corner, where Katie soon settled happily, hunkered down on soft sand for the final hour of the ebb.
When you see a line of bilge keelers like this, you can understand why there was such fantastic resistance to them. Because they are funny looking things. There's a crow and a gull arguing over a flatfish.
As soon as things had dried out underfoot, I went for a bit of a stroll across the beach. The sands here are as perfect as sands could ever be. Firm underfoot, yet soft as silk to the touch. Elie is to Fife what Rock is to Cornwall, the place where the poshest people in Edinburgh own their second homes and spend the summers sailing their lovely luggers around the area. Eventually the tide started to return. Within an hour or so, Katie had had her 12 inches of water, and we sneaked back into the Firth of Forth, where we joined the freshly running flood.
So after Elie, the chart shows this thing with a binnacle on it and then two rocks. Oops. And a shallow bit between them.
The sun had come out and the wind had turned our fetch into a broad reach. I raised the topper main, then dropped it again. The wind swung right around to the south, and before long, with the help of the tide, we were heading towards Port Edgar at upwards of 5 knots, although you'd never know it from the movement of the boat and the pressure of the wind. I love the flexibility of the gunter rig. The big mainsail makes her feel like a giant dinghy. The short mast is easy to handle and is excellent for a trysail or small loose-footed main. I am, I confess, a bit of a sail hoarder. The Ghoster came from a boat I owned at least 2 decades ago. I've never owned a boat that sails as well as this one. Having just sailed 3,000 or more miles in a year in a Centaur, a yacht world-renowned for its slightly lumbering predictability, coming back to the Minstrel was proving to be such a pleasure. Her ability to trim her own course according to the set of the sails and to put herself back in the groove after an odd wave here or there are just some of her endearing traits. The weather brightened up most wonderfully for an hour or so, as it often does in Scotland. You can be sailing under a leaden sky at 11, and by 12 it's like a summer's day, and by 3 it's gone back to grey. It always leaves you feeling hopeful that good weather is just around the corner though. As you come west up the Forth, it narrows like a funnel. The navigation gets a bit more complicated with rocks and islands scattered all over the shop. This area has been fortified for centuries. The Second World War was a particularly fruitful time for building forts and gun batteries. Some islands are a bit like unsinkable battleships.
Bad thing about here though is the airport.
Most of these rocks and islands are detritus from the passage of the glacier. Some no more than piles of rubble, some of which has come 100 miles from the very centre of Scotland. Some of the islands are more resolute bits of rock that the glacier skirted rather than scraped level. But the whole area is beautifully buoyed, unless you're a very determined shallow sailor, in which case, well, you deserve what you get. Inchholm is one of the larger islands, big enough for a decent-sized abbey, occupied by the Augustines, who thought that the Benedictines were a bunch of delusional freaks. Got to hand it to the stonemason though, those walls are so well put together that their remains all but defy gravity. Then it all starts to get a bit busy as you approach the most important easterly crossing of the Firth. Initially it was all ferries, but then came the Victorians and their railway bridges. I've got to say that sailing under the Forth railway bridge in a small boat makes the magnificent engineering seem even more impressive. You literally have to see it to appreciate it. The vision and drive of the Victorians is mind-boggling. 300 feet high, 2.5 miles long, 42,000 tons of prime steel. All the calculations done with pencil, paper and log tables. Not afraid of a challenge or a risk, those Victorians. Construction began on the Cantilever Bridge in 1882 and by 1890 it was finished. It was the first major structure in the UK to be made using steel. The Eiffel Tower, which is more or less its contemporary, is made out of cast iron. Stick that in your peep, you Frenchman. 4,500 people were employed in building it. 73 died, 38 from falling, 9 crushed, 9 drowned, 8 from falling objects and 3 in a bothy fire, although I'm not really sure that counts. The space under the bridge and immediately upstream has an oddly forgotten feel to it. At one time it would have been alive with ferry workers and dockers. Now it is little more than an over-engineered suburb of Edinburgh. But noisy, with the sound of trains rolling over the railway bridge, the relentless roar of aeroplanes, and then comes the sound of the trucks and buses bashing the noisy joints of the Forth Road Bridge, which was only built in 1890 and all but redundant now that the second crossing has arrived, or, while we were there, will arrive. Then into Port Edgar Marina, which is built inside the ineffective embrace of 2 inadequate MOD-designed breakwaters. The architecture of giant corrugated iron sheds gives a clue to its former existence as a naval base, primarily for minesweepers and fast patrol boats.
Okay, so that's Scottish mint, lamb, onions and tomatoes.
After an excellent low-carb supper, I took the bike across the Forth Road Bridge. In the middle is a section where sentimental lovers click specially made padlocks to the railings as impermanent mementos of their imperfect relationships. I fear that there are times when I'll never fully understand the drives and inclinations of my fellow human beings.